Well, Lynn and Robin, thanks so much for inviting me to speak, and thanks to the MITA Institute. Hopefully, some of my perspective from Silicon Valley will be helpful. By way of a little bit of background, I work at a venture capital firm that I helped start called Floodgate. We're a very small venture firm based in Palo Alto, and we invest primarily in a combination of business and consumer software and services companies. Some of the companies that we've gotten involved with on the consumer side, Twitter, we were one of the seed investors there. Rally, Tom Saris is here. We got involved with them early. And then on the business side, companies like Bazaar Voice, Spiceworks, SolarWinds, people like that. And I like to say that we either invest too early or way too early in these companies. But that's sort of the more academic description of the job. But when people ask me what my job is, what I really say is that my job is to hunt what I call thunder lizards. And so has anybody ever seen the movie Godzilla before? Okay, so that's where the metaphor comes from. So, when I think about startups, I like the metaphor of Godzilla, because if you think about Godzilla, for those of you who remember Godzilla movies, thunder lizards are hatched from radio-activated atomic eggs, and then they swim across the ocean and emerge with an attitude, devouring all of their startup competitors, breathing fire on buildings, throwing train cars around like they're sausage links, swiping holes in the side of big street signs and the like. And that always just sort of captured for me what startups should be about. I think that too often when we think about entrepreneurship, we think about entrepreneurship as something fun to try or something we should all get involved with someday. But I think that fundamentally great entrepreneurship is a cultural issue about thinking big. And so I believe fundamentally that there are 10 awesome new startups created a year worldwide. And that the trick is not so much to have a lot of startups. The trick for any region is to be one of the places that thinks big enough where one of those startups can hatch, where one of those thunder lizards can come. And so part of what I hope to do is to bring some atomic radiation to Mexico and encourage entrepreneurs and the entrepreneur ecosystem to think big. Because thunder lizards are not just about arrogance or ego or bigness or making bold claims. The social good that is created from a Google or a Facebook or an eBay or a Yahoo or an Amazon or a Dell is just tremendous. The positive ripple effects are extraordinary. And what I found is that it takes enormous sacrifices to build a real company, to be an entrepreneur. And so if you're going to make those sacrifices, you might as well go after ideas that are big enough and worthy of that sacrifice. So I wanted to talk a little bit about thunder lizard traits, and then where my partner Ann Muraco is also here, where Ann and I are looking for future thunder lizards and what may represent opportunities. And then I also wanted to talk just briefly about some ideas that I have that relate to Mexico. And I'm not going to pretend to be an expert, but hopefully they'll be helpful. So thunder lizards, in my view, have four main traits. The first is a visionary entrepreneur. And a visionary entrepreneur is not just an entrepreneur who has visions, but it's a person who has an authentic and unique insight about a new area of technology that's going to change the world. One of the things that we often forget, and it's one of the reasons that thunder lizards can happen in our business, the technology industry is truly magical. And I don't say that just from a biased point of view. We're the only industry I've ever seen that has this thing called Moore's Law, where the performance of computing doubles every 18 months in an inexorable pace. And there have been bubbles in lots of industries before. There have been real estate bubbles, there have been financial bubbles, there have been tulip bubbles hundreds of years ago. But what's different about the tech business is when the computing capacity doubles every 18 months, inexorably, there's always a continuous magical supply of new companies. Every 10 to 15 years, it is axiomatic that we will see a new supply of awesome, disruptive Thunder Lizard companies. And no industry in human history has ever been able to produce that. And so the importance of the visionary entrepreneur is young people who aren't burdened by the legacy of the past will see a technology trend, and they will have an authentic understanding and knowledge about that trend that is usually non-consensus but right. And so the first thing that we look for in the Thunder Lizard is a visionary entrepreneur who is totally authentically matched to a new technology trend. You know, Mark Zuckerberg was that way at Facebook. Larry Ellison was that way when it came to SQL programming language. Bill Gates was that way. He was a PC hacker enthusiast. We look for that visionary entrepreneur who has the non-consensus but right perspective on a major new trend. And their knowledge is informed by an authenticity of understanding of the new trend. The second thing we look for is a huge potential market. And so, you know, not just what is your product, but what business are you in? And why is this the type of business where if it works, it could achieve worldwide scale and global hegemony as a business? The third thing that we look for is a fundamental advantage. And a fundamental advantage is usually deep technology, or sometimes it might be a network effect type of business. And then the last thing we look for is modest capital requirements. And so we like to say that we're looking for a company that can light a forest fire with just one match. And you know, in many ways, we believe that the true measure of a breakthrough entrepreneurial disruptive technology idea is, can it change the world with a minimum amount of capital? Because truly disruptive ideas can. Truly disruptive ideas have a business model that is riding that cost curve of Moore's Law. It's like surfing a wave. And so those are the four things we really look for when we talk about Thunder Lizards. Now, the other thing that I find interesting about hunting Thunder Lizards is I tend to believe that the technology industry follows waves. And so, and I think this is largely because of Moore's Law. So for example, when I was a kid, the PC revolution happened. And for about 10 or so years, a whole new class of companies just sprouted that became significant, important companies that changed the world. And then not long after that, the client-server revolution happened. And the client-server revolution similarly produced Oracle and a host of other companies that built client-server applications and databases. And then not long after that was the internet. And then I think most recently we've been seeing social networking as a major tech cycle. We've been spending a lot of time trying to think about what's the next big cycle after social networking. So I don't think social networking is over with any more than I think the internet's over with, or client server. We still use databases, we still use PCs. But I no longer believe that social networking is now a startup theme. I believe that social networking has become a fairly mature opportunity, and that the next place where a lot of Thunder Lizards might hatch, I believe, is in an area that we're loosely calling right now the hypernet. So when I was in early 2011, I started to spend a lot of time thinking about what the next tech cycle might be. And we had a few observations. The first observation was that 2011 was the first year that Microsoft Windows access devices represented less than 50% of internet access devices. And if you think about that, that's very profound. So if you look at 2005, it was a pretty simple web world. You had basically one World Wide Web. You had Microsoft Windows accessing the web and using Google as your search engine. Well, now there is no one World Wide Web. There's the web, but there's also Facebook, there's Twitter, you know, there's Evernote, there's Dropbox, and so and then there's no unified access device either. Now there's Windows, but now it's the things in our purses and pockets have changed the fundamental architecture, I believe, of the internet. And so the idea of the hypernet and hyperweb is that we're moving to a world that is no longer, the balance of power is shifting away from computers as we know them, and that 2011 was the first year that the computer industry really quit being about computers. And now we believe that the computer industry, the digital landscape, is moving into a world of billions of connected nodes accessing millions of clouds. And that new world is going to be, in my view, the next big tech cycle. And so one of the things that we're looking for is companies and entrepreneurs who are trying to build some of the enabling technologies of this new tech cycle. And one of the reasons I think it matters for Mexico or anywhere is, you know, it's like a lot of things, what was once the future is now the past. And so we don't know where the entrepreneurs are going to come from that build this. And markets today are so huge and global and can be penetrated so quickly that you just never know where the next big idea is going to come from. And so, you know, one of the things that we're looking for is entrepreneurs worldwide who are kindred spirits in that vision, who are kind of looking for the next tech cycle, looking for the next $1 trillion of wealth creation in the tech business. And so I thought it might be helpful to also just talk about some ideas related specifically to Mexico. And then I'll move to the next speaker in our program. The first is from a cultural point of view. So I imagine that there's a lot of discussion about more entrepreneurship classes in the major universities. And I imagine there's a lot of discussion about more funding for startups. And I imagine that there's a lot of discussion about just different ways to stimulate and accelerate new startups. But one of the things that I think would be incredibly valuable would be to take entrepreneurs who have already created giant companies with huge outcomes and expose them to the highest potential entrepreneurs. One of the things I remember is when I was a freshman at Stanford, people from the tech industry who'd created billion-dollar companies would just come and speak at our classes. You know, Scott McNeely would come in and talk about Sun, or Vinod Khosla would come in, or Bill Joy, and that was just Sun. You know, the Oracle guys would come in, this Osborne guy who started that funky portable computer company would come in, Steve Jobs occasionally. And when you're sitting there in the audience and that person is right there, you think to yourself, you know, I could really make this happen. You know, they're not that different than I am. But what was important about these folks is that they had a value system that said that the default approach to thinking about startups should be one of idealism and thinking big. And so what I would think about if I were trying to help stimulate huge ideas in Mexico, I would take the top 20 entrepreneurs who've created giant companies and do everything I can to connect them to students aged 18 to 25 in Mexico. You know, I would have Reid Hoffman go on a tour to as many campuses as he would take the time to go visit. Because entrepreneurs who create these giant outcomes, they just think differently. They have a different frame of reference, a different mindset on what greatness looks like. And it's just as much work to create a mediocre, not so relevant company as it is to create a truly great one. And a lot of it's just a state of mind difference. So that was one idea. The other idea that I had, and I don't know how applicable it might be, but in the United States right now, one of the things that frustrates me and disappoints me is that there are several really smart people who want to come to the country and build startups, and they can't, because I think that our immigration policies are stupid. And it's not a partisan issue. You know, the Democrats and the Republicans are kind of acting like Kmart and Walmart. You know, it's just, they're both lacking the courage or the wisdom to solve what's an obvious problem. And to give you a feel for how crazy there's this one company that's getting started called Blue Seed, where they want to buy a boat 15 miles off of the coast of San Francisco so that people can be on this boat and shuttle back and forth to the United States. And I'm like, I have no clue if that's ever going to work, but that's just awesome. right? We need to give them some money, right? And so I think about things like that, and I wonder if there might be ways for Mexico to take advantage of the United States' current lack of wisdom on this topic and make it possible, possibly for entrepreneurs to go back and forth between the two countries as they build their startups. I have no idea if it's doable, but my basic view is that whenever an entrepreneur anywhere in the world wants to make a huge sacrifice to come to this hemisphere to start a great company, we should do everything we can to make that happen. And that we need to stop making excuses, we need to stop talking about why it can't happen, and we need to start to take action and do something to make it happen. And my basic view is that those people are the most valuable people in the world, and we just need to have them be closer any way we can. And if we'll get as many as we can in the U.S., but if the U.S. decides to continue to be stupid about it, then let's get them as close as we can and hope for the best. So those are my main thoughts. And then the other thing is just an observation. If it does indeed become true that we're moving to a world of billions of nodes and millions of clouds, my other thought is that if you think about services industries in Mexico, whether it's testing or sort of outsourced type of talent, perhaps it would be good to focus some of that energy on some of the, as Wayne Gretzky likes to say, skating to where the puck is going. And so if those types of industries can be formed in Mexico, not only will they be able to take advantage of the next gathering wave and the economics attendant to that gathering wave, but the probability that a great visionary entrepreneur will actually have a great idea for the next big startup, I think will actually go up as well.